Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, here we are, our first NFP in real life episode.
Our very first.
I'm so excited. All right, what are we talking about, Kathleen?
Today we're going to talk about providentialism versus responsible parenthood. Yeah.
Hot topic to get us started.
It is a hot topic. Yeah. And I guess, for me, it's always been, how do you tell, how do you kind of discern, I guess, where you are in your marriage and in your family life, whether, can you rely on providentialism all the time? And do you rely on responsible parenthood all the time? Can it kind of go back and forth a little bit? How do you kind of discern that and balance the two, I guess?
Right. And I've met tons of couples that are like, oh yeah, well, we kind of used NFP, we had a couple of kids and then it was like, oh, we need to take a break for a little while. So we used NFP for a little while. And then we just decided to stop using NFP. We had a couple more kids, and I think that's the beauty of NFP, that it's not something that you have to go to a doctor to get it removed, or, it's something that you can easily stop and go.
Exactly.
Although I'm always going to promote charting for health, even if you're you're like, okay, we don't have an active reason to avoid right now. We'll just kind of let it happen. But you should still keep charting to kind of keep an eye on your health.
100%.
That's my caveat there.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Well, you know what, maybe for people that might not understand exactly what these things are, maybe we should define them first. Do you think?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with providentialism. Let's say it correctly too. Providentialism. Providentialism. Yeah. So providentialism would be basically just relying on God's providence for, at least in this context, relying on God's providence in the case of planning your family.
Yes.
And so that, essentially it would be doing whatever, and maybe not charting at all, not looking at rules of NFP or abstaining in any particular part of your cycle for any reason.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think, well, yeah. Okay. That's providential. I was going to go on some thoughts, but we'll save the thoughts for when we're really talking about it. And then if we're talking about responsible parenthood, so this is actually a term that, was laid out well in Humani Vitae. Do you want to read?
Sure.
Ellen, do you want to read from Humani Vitae, that little definition, then I can kind of sum it up?
Yeah. So this is Humani Vitae. This is paragraph 10. And the title of this paragraph is actually responsible parenthood. So, I'm not reading the whole paragraph. I'm just reading a section of it. So, with regard to the biological processes, responsible parenthood means an awareness of and respect for their proper functions. In the procreative faculty, the human mind discerns biological laws that apply to the human person. Well, that was a lot. Yeah. Okay, I'm still reading though.
Keep going. We'll sum it up.
With regard to man's innate drives and emotions, responsible parenthood means that man's reason and will must exert control over them. And then the last part, with regard to physical, economic, psychological, and social conditions, responsible parenthood is exercised by those who prudently and generously decide to have more children, and by those who, for serious reasons and with due respect to moral precepts, decide not to have additional children for either a certain or an indefinite period of time. Boom. Right there.
Paul VI. There he goes.
Right there.
Yeah. So all of that is a bunch of awesome theological language for what the USCCB has really summarized as, so from the USCCB website, it says, responsible parenthood requires that husband and wife understand God's design for marriage, that it is love-giving, unitive, and life-giving, procreative. Spouses ought to be well-formed in understanding church teaching and reflect upon their responsibilities toward each other, children already born, and the wider society when deciding when to attempt to conceive or not. So I think that's really
such a good, yeah. I think the
It's,
USSCB like really nailed it there. That's a great definition.
Yeah, in layman's terms.
Yes, right. Because I think there's a lot of heady language. I love this definition from Humana Vitae, and this is what I use when I go to like marriage talks and stuff. I use those 3 quotes, but of course I explain them as well.
Right, exactly. You kind of always need to bring it down a level.
Yeah, but I love. I mean, Pope Paul VI spells it out. He's like, look, if you have physical, if you have economic, if you have psychological, or if there's social conditions, like it's okay to plan your family. It's okay to use NFP. And this also, before we like jump really into the topic, I want to say that last quote that I read, this is where that grave reasons thing comes from.
Yeah.
And so grave reasons was a mistranslation in the first translation to English.
I didn't even know this.
It was so it was a mistranslation when this was like first put out, and the word in Italian is grave, which is spelled exactly like grave,
right?
And essentially it is kind of the same word, but the thing is, in Italian, the word grave, like if you go to Google Translate, type grave in and then pick Italian, and it'll spit out serious. It won't spit out grave. The word grave in English has a totally different connotation than the word grave in Italian. And so that's where that grave reasons come from. And it's actually a mistranslation. So I just want to throw that out there, because I think a lot of times people are like, you have to have grave reasons. And it's like, actually, grave is more serious of a word than Pope Paul VI intended to put in that spot. He intended to put the word serious, and serious just means like real. You need to have a real reason for your pregnancy. And a real reason might be a physical reason, an economic reason, a psychological reason, or a social condition, because he spelled it out. All right, now we're just repeating ourselves.
No. I think you're right, because when we, people get all up on this high horse about grave reasons, and I think they think like that sort of connotates to like life or death, right? Like it's
right.
But it doesn't have to be life or death. It could just be, like you said, your mental state is really important. Especially if you have other children, you need to be at your best to be raising the children that you already have. And if another child is going to kind of throw that out of whack, that's something you owe to your children already born, right? So
exactly. And there's where that response, I love the term responsible parenthood. I love that this was the wording that Pope Paul VI, came upon, because like responsibility it's just such a good word. I don't even know how to explain why I like it so much, but
I agree with you.
We're called as parents to be responsible for the children we already have. And if we're struggling to make ends meet, and maybe that's the only thing that's going on, right? Maybe we have 3 kids, but we're really struggling to make ends meet. But like, I'm healthy, I'm happy, all that kind of stuff, but I'm worried about having another kid because of this aspect. That's fine, because you need to be able to support your current family. You are responsible for them. Your job as a Catholic husband and wife is not just to be a baby making machine.
Right.
Like you as a unit you're trying to get like everybody to heaven. Like that's your end goal.
Exactly. And I think, that needs to be the focus of everything we do in parenthood, right? Including and in our marriage. I mean, that's the number one thing that you always need to keep the focus on, is what is going to be the best for my family, for my spouse, to basically lead us all to heaven, right? And so I will say that I was making notes on all of this and just kind of thinking about it all, and I was thinking about providentialism and like, listen, my husband would love to be a providentialist. I think sometimes like he would just love to throw the rules of NFP out the window.
All right. Honestly, I'd love to throw the chart out sometimes. Like I also,
yeah.
Like, I feel like I know what your husband means. Like, I would love to be a providentialist in that, like, I would love to just like not have to worry about it and be like, yeah, you know what? Like, it's going to be fine. But like, I don't know. We are such fallen humans that like we do. Yeah. We have that need for planning our families.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I was even saying like, I've been charting for a little, like over 9 years now, right? Between 9 and 10 years. And it's like, I know my body so well at this point that it's like, I don't even have to physically chart anymore. And I can know where I am in regards to my fertility, right? Like I can know when I'm taking a risk so it's like at a point where it's like, I can't even really be a true providentialist anymore because I can't extract that information just from my brain and just throw it out the window. Right. It's like, I just know, you know, and again, that came with like years of practice, but it's like, yeah, I know every single time we take a risk, like, it's like, I know it. So it's like, I can't really just say like, I mean, you do, but you can still be a providentialist during those times where you're just like, you know what, Lord, this is what my marriage needs right now. And I'm just going to put this in your hands. You know, maybe I have reasons that I might not want to get pregnant right now, but they're not really that serious. So, you know, if we got pregnant, it would be fine. I know that. So Lord, whatever you want. Yeah. You know, and I think that that's a really healthy sort of view of providentialism. I think there can be, I mean, everything in moderation, right? Like, yes, we talk about like with everything, there's, you know, an extreme on one end is, you know, I don't know, an extreme on either end tends to lead to vice, right? Like virtue is always in the middle. Mm-hmm. So if we really kind of think about that, I think sometimes, and maybe there are families that just have, you know, buckets of money, you know, that they could have 25 children and finances would never be an issue, right?
And somehow the woman's body is able to handle that. Let's just throw that
somehow she's able to handle that. Her mental health is just like on point, you know, like
they've got a huge village of support.
Exactly. Family support. Like, and listen, she's got just everything super organized. Nothing gets out of whack. Like, listen, if that person exists, by all means, just live your life relying on providentialism. Like, I think that's great. That's fine. But I think that when we really sit down to kind of determine like, well, what am I called to in my marriage, right? And in my family life, what I keep coming back to is that it doesn't have to always be providentialism, and it doesn't always have to be, you know, 100% responsible parenthood, although responsible parenthood is usually a smart thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there are times where we might have to be called to lean more to one than the other. Right. So maybe there are times where your marriage is kind of in a rocky spot and you really just feel like you need that unitive aspect, right? Like you need the unitive part of sex to just really help your marriage. And do you want to get pregnant right now? Not necessarily. But again, like that's something you just need to put in the hands of God at that time. Maybe, you know, and all of this is just, you know, it's one of the beautiful parts about marriage and family is that you're in a constant state of discernment, in constant state of asking God, what is it you want from me right now? Do you want me to kind of trust fall and love my husband? Do you want me to just kind of practice a little more, you know, virtue right now, to build virtue through abstinence right now, you know, and give my children more of me, right? Like the children that I already have. It's like, I don't know. It just feels like it's always this back and forth between the two that God probably wants for most people, I would imagine.
I think that you really nailed it on the head right there with those two questions. Like, you know, is God calling me to really trust him right now? Because the unitive aspect of sex is what my spouse needs right now, you know, is what my spouse and I need right now. and yet we're trying to avoid, and it, could be kind of a risky time. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Or then and then the other question, or is God calling us to grow in virtue through abstinence at this time right now? And I think that is the question. And that is what you need to take to prayer during those times when abstinence is really hard and you're trying to avoid, is take that question and see what God is telling you through that question, and pray it together. This is not just a one-sided thing.
Right.
Oh man. Yeah. That's killer.
See, I'll tell you that this has been a big personal internal battle for me in the last, few years. It's if you don't have any of those grave or serious reasons to abstain, right, then should you interpret that as God calling you to rely on providentialism for a time? And, it's something I've just battled with a lot. I have, again, do I have really serious reasons to not have a child right now? No. But do I feel like adding another child might throw off the equilibrium in a way that might kind of be bad for usually my mental health, right? I'm someone who gets really overwhelmed. I'm not super organized.
I feel you. I feel you there. Yep.
Yeah. Right. It's just and just when I think I have things balancing on this fulcrum, where it's you're just they're finally evened out, one extra thing could just throw the whole thing off. Right.
Yep.
So
and that's really important to take that into consideration.
Right.
Your mental health. I mean, Pope Paul VI said it. He said mental.
He did. It was in there, right? We're not just making that up, pulling it out.
Yeah. Or I guess he said psychological, but that,
right. Yeah. No, exactly. 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and I can tell you right now, I'm answering this question with myself right now. So, and I apologize for anyone listening that knows me personally and doesn't know this yet, but I'm 13 weeks pregnant right now with number 5.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So, and it's funny because being pregnant right now has really sort of answered this question for me. We wanted another one, and, we just kind of said, we don't have any really serious reasons to avoid right now. So let's just see what happens. We just put it in God's hands. And now here we are 13 weeks later. But, being pregnant and having 4 other children. So my kids are 2, 4, almost 7, and 8. So they're all young. We've got some in school, some at home, and there's a lot going on. And to be pregnant right now is really, really hard. It's with everything you have going on. It doesn't matter how sick I feel. It doesn't matter how tired I am. I need to be up at 6 a.m. making breakfast and lunch, making sure everyone's uniforms are clean, getting them all dressed, fighting them sometimes, a lot of the times, get them out the door, and it doesn't matter how you feel, right? Which when I had my first 3, no one was in school. We had the day where we could just kind of relax and I could take it at my own pace. We could go somewhere if I felt great. We could just hang out and have fun at home if we didn't. But it's that's not the case anymore. So I'm realizing that as I get older, it's a lot harder to physically be pregnant. And my oldest 2 are kind of transitioning, or have transitioned really, from this baby toddler stage to real kids with real issues and, in need of this totally different type of engagement and connection now. I could raise at this point babies and toddlers with my eyes closed, right? I could connect with them. I could play with them. I could do whatever.
Let's just get them to age 4 and then pass them off to somebody else.
Exactly. And now it's 7 and 8, man. That's a whole new ball game that I have not tackled yet. Right. I don't know. I have to learn how to engage with them at this different stage. And still having these young kids, being exhausted because I'm pregnant, and then having to learn how to parent this whole new age. It's you're in a lot of places, you're being pulled in a lot of places. And so while I'm super excited for this new baby, we're all very excited. My kids are like over the moon. I'm just realizing that, you know what? I said to my husband, I said, I feel like we may need to start wrapping this up. Like we need to just like maybe this is our last one, maybe. And he's like, yeah, I think I'm kind of feeling the same way. Like maybe it is. And that's okay. But you said it before, Ellen, too, that you don't have to like make a snip or a surgery and like have this irreversible thing. And I think that's a really key part of being like open to life, really. And something that allows us to kind of constantly discern between these periods of providentialism and responsible parenthood and all this kind of stuff is that I could say that right now, right? Like, hey, number 5 is probably it for us. And like, that's okay. That's going to be okay. But number 5 could get to be 5 years old. And all of a sudden we're just like, well, you know what? Maybe we have one more go round. I don't know.
Just like do one more time. Like,
yeah, it's like, wow, things are really stable right now. It's like, we haven't made any decision that has really like put that like, and that's the beautiful thing. Nothing ever has to be permanent until you go through menopause, right?
Right.
Like,
no, then that's God telling you that you're done. Like, right. It's not you.
Exactly. God's like, you did good, kid.
Good job.
We're done now.
You ran the race, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, but it's funny because it's an awesome thing and it's a beautiful thing. And it's sort of like a relief that like, we don't have to make these permanent decisions, but as you're in it, it can also feel really hard. The constant need to discern back and forth and, to just not know really like where it's going to end or, that can be exhausting as you're in it and as you're practicing it. But I don't know. It's been a lot of thoughts for me personally on this topic the last couple months. And like, before I got pregnant, it was just a lot of this happening in between like, well, what do I do? Do I feel like I want to be, I don't really want to be pregnant right now, but it's like, but like, I would love to have another like child in our family. I would love to have another baby, so, it's just this, like, what are you calling me to right now, Lord?
Right. Well, and I think there's like almost a little bit more definition that we should do because we've sort of been pinning providentialism and responsible parenthood, like on opposite sides of the spectrum. And I don't think, that's quite right. Like responsible parenthood as, if we go back to what Pope Paul VI said in Humanae Vitae, like responsible parenthood is practiced by those who avoid a pregnancy or by those who choose
to
have a pregnancy. Right. And so responsible parenthood for you in a season might mean, okay, now is the time to have a child because we are called to bring children into the world and raise them in the faith and be life-giving. And of course, for those of you who are listening, who are, have experienced infertility issues, I know that's a completely other topic that we're not really touching on for this episode. We're kind of talking more, people who are more on the hyper fertile side. No, just kidding.
That seems to be my case anyway.
I know. Yeah. Well, and there's like much contention about like that term too. They're like, there's no such thing as hyper fertile. And it's like,
I know.
But if you're someone who like every single time has been like, this is a risky time and then gotten pregnant. That seems a little hyper fertile. Right? Like,
it is. Yeah, I do. It's like you have friends who are just like, oh yeah, like right around peak day and not pregnant. It's like, I can't even.
How did that happen to you? What? Yeah, I know.
How does that happen?
That is not what I have experienced. I have not experienced trying for a couple of months. So I can't speak to that experience at all. Which is why I like to have people on the podcast who can speak to those kinds of experiences.
For sure.
Because I think you and I are sort of in that same boat of like, it's like, as soon as we say, oh yeah, a kid would be fine, It's like, boom, pregnant.
That's exactly what I said. I said that to a group of friends recently. We were out and I was like, as soon as I start thinking like maybe we should have another child, like I'm usually already pregnant. It's like, all I have to do is speak it into existence. It's like unbelievable. And again, like that isn't like, I don't, if anyone is listening that struggles with infertility, like I apologize if that sounds sort of like aloof and naive or whatever, because, you know, that is a real struggle. But, you know, it is like one of those things where the hyper fertile sort of like that my husband and I have realized like it takes like nothing for us to get pregnant. That's also played a lot into the biggest hardships of our marriage, you know, because it's like, it's not just this like great, like, oh yeah, you can have whatever babies you want, whenever you want. It's led to a lot of, well, I really can't get pregnant right now. Like I am not in a good place to get pregnant right now. Right. And so that means we need to avoid a little bit more. Like we need to like be really conservative and then you don't have as many available days. And then that can build resentment. And, you know, it's like everybody has their cross regardless of where it is. And that's a little bit of an aside, but yeah, I don't know. We're fallen, aren't we?
We are. Well, and you know, I think that's a really good transition to something else I wanted to mention on this episode is that like NFP exists because we are fallen. You know, like Adam and Eve in Eden would not have needed to like try to avoid or space pregnancies because like their sexual desire would have been perfectly aligned with God's will. And let me just throw this out here, and I might like, you know, DM me if you have a different opinion here, but like our bodies don't work properly because we're fallen. Like our bodies, our female bodies were designed to naturally space pregnancies by about 2 to 3 years. And that's what a lot of doctors will say, like, that's kind of a healthy spacing, you know, that gives your body enough time to kind of recoup, is giving it like that 2 to 3 year mark. But like the act of nursing and the hormones that are present in nursing were designed to suppress ovulation
that's a good
for
point.
that amount of time, you know, and there's a myriad of reasons why that doesn't work. You know, I don't suggest, don't just think you're infertile because you're breastfeeding. Like,
right.
And that's because, you know, we as a culture, we wean earlier than, you know, kind of naturally designed. And we have like mental reasons why we need to wean earlier. You know, women work, right? And they need to pump, and the pump doesn't produce those same hormones. Oh gosh, like, I mean, there's just, let's see, I wrote some ideas down here. You know, things like latching issues, right? Babies don't nurse. My first, I had to exclusively pump for a year. Like she never nursed. And so like my fertility returned somewhere around like 5 months. Right. And that, you know, that's not how my body was designed. My body was designed to wait. And so, you know, those kinds of things, you know, our body's not working the way they were designed to. I would say that's because we're fallen. And or a result of.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What a world, man.
But yeah, so we have NFP. God has lovingly gifted us this tool because he sees, okay, y'all are in a fallen world. And you have reasons that you need to avoid. And it's okay that you have those reasons. And so here's this tool of NFP, of fertility awareness, to be able to take a look at your fertility and, you know, and stay aligned with my will for marital intimacy. I still want marital intimacy to be unitive and procreative. But like, let me throw something out here, right? So God wanted marital intimacy to be unitive and procreative. So a couple weeks ago, Immaculate Conception happened, and I put something on the Instagram page about the Immaculate Conception and how our church is celebrating 2 people having sex.
That's right. I saw this. Yes.
Yeah. And I had some fabulous conversations with people on this. Oh my gosh, it was so great. But one of the things that came out of that was, okay, so who had better sex? Anne and Joachim when they were immaculately conceiving Mary, or Adam and Eve before the fall?
Yo,
I don't know. There were lots of ideas. Maybe they equally had as good of sex. Maybe it was Adam and Eve. I don't know. Right. We'll never know this side of heaven.
You'll never, it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Who knows?
Exactly.
Exactly.
But let me throw something else out here. Adam and Eve didn't conceive until after the fall. So that means, well, I don't know. What I'm interpreting from that is that God doesn't need every sexual act to produce a baby.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Maybe we should just end the episode there.
I know. Boom. Mic drop. See you guys next week. I don't know. 2 weeks.
With that, everyone.
Well, you know what? The one thing that I really did want to say, because I feel like we haven't done a totally fair job of talking about providentialism in a nicer light. And, I think that in most marriages and in most situations, providentialism should sort of be something used, not 100% of the time, right? In moderation, as we said, go through periods of providentialism and whatever. But for those couples that do rely solely on providentialism, I can say that can really be an incredible witness to the power of God in our lives. I don't think God's ever going to say, well, that was silly of you to just,
that was so silly of you to just trust me.
Yeah. Even though you had just $200 in the bank and 7 children already, that was really silly of you to just, go ahead and rely on me. God would obviously not do that. And I mean, I can say, especially when we were, wow, sorry about that. Especially when we were first married and, had no money and, ended up having these 2 babies. I mean, my first 2 are 18 months apart, so it was they were very close and we didn't have a lot. We also didn't know what we were doing in regards to NFP yet, but we were trying NFP, just wasn't working for us. But I could see so clearly in those times how God showed up for us, and I mean, he showed up in so many ways throughout our marriage, and it almost always aligns with around the time we're going to have another baby. So, it can be really, really powerful. I literally remember being on the way home from a hospital. And this is this was humbling. I remember being on the way home from a hospital with a baby. I don't remember which one. And stopping at the grocery store for something on the way and going to the checkout, and my card was declined. And I remember feeling this sense of panic, oh my gosh, first of all, why is my card declining? What does that mean? We have a baby in the car, and this really, but then I remember right after that, in the next couple weeks, God just lavished us. It was just money came from somewhere, I forget, that was totally random. This was years and years ago now. But money just came from some random place. People were bringing us meals. It was just and God does when you really lean into him, I mean, and in these really intense ways, right? All the saints, we can look at providentialists and be y'all are crazy, right? But the greatest saints were seen as crazy, and some of them were actually crazy, right?
That's very fair. I mean, I have similar stories too. With my first, I had just quit my job. I had no prospect of a job. We could not live on just my husband's salary, and we felt called to have a kid, and we're okay, yeah. And then after I found out I was pregnant, he got a raise and I got a job.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
It was just and that happened with number 2 as well. Because then it was okay, I'm not going to be able to work once we have 2 because childcare costs versus what I'm making, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so it was okay, well, we're really feeling called to have another kid right now. I got pregnant and then he got a raise and a bonus. And it was like, what,
Yes. Isn't that, I remember after I had my second, I sort of like quit my job very, very spontaneously. Like neither my husband nor I were planning on me going into work that day and quitting my job. It was like, I tell him today, I was like, it was all the Holy Spirit and you're just lucky that I listened to him. Okay. Cause, and he jokes, we were working for the same place for a church. And I was bringing 2 kids in with me like a lot of the time. And I don't know, I just got overwhelmed and I just realized like, this is not what I want for my children. This is not what I want for me. And this is not like, it doesn't make sense for the church, right? Like as they're functioning, right? Like,
yeah.
So I quit my job and then I called my husband and I was like, we couldn't live on just his salary. And I was just like, I think I just quit my job. And he was like,
it's like, what
are you talking about this? And I was like, yeah. But then what happened? It was like this massive, massive trust fall into the arms of the Lord. And then, he gets offered a different position within the same parish that came with like almost double his salary.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
I end up in just a part-time job somewhere that like, so we were already back at like what we were making. Right. And it was like, and God he just like showed up, and then it put my husband in a completely different career path, which he's now still in and has given him like real prospect for the future,
oh my
gosh. and he's like, it was just so providential. And that's the thing, like maybe, in talking about providentialism, we don't just have to talk about it as, like when you're trying to have a baby, right? Like when you, like, it really is a matter of leaning into God to provide in all ways for your family, right? And knowing that maybe you didn't intend to get pregnant and here you are, right? Maybe you were using NFP, you were trying to be responsible. Something went wrong somewhere, which happens, right? And now here you are, right? Like that's a time to really lean into providentialism, right? Like just, Lord God, I'm here and I don't know why, and I don't really want to be, but I know that you're going to take care of us. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh yeah, God, just give us babies whenever you want. Although again, like there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Necessarily, because God will show up. He will always show up, especially when you're just when you are receiving children as a gift. I mean, he's going to make sure you're taken care of. But even if you didn't intend to receive a gift at that point, like lean into providentialism, become a providentialist, and just, Lord God, show up for us. Like, I know you have us in your hands. You love our family.
Yes.
You want what's best for us. And you're going to take care of us. Right. And what it says, have no anxiety at all. Right. Like, which,
exactly.
But like that we can trust that he means that, like, I will take care of you. I am gifting you this child and I will make sure this child is taken care of. Just listen to me, follow me,
Yeah. Oh man, I think that's just such a great place to just wrap up this episode. Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. First episode in the bag.
First one. Woo! That was exciting.
All right. Be sure to follow Charting Toward Intimacy on Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me. I mean, I'm the one who handles the Instagram, but if you want to like reach out to Kathleen, like DM me and I'll get it to her. Or send us an email that's in the show notes. And yeah, until next time.
Awesome. See you guys.